You're listening to the Alpha's love stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. Chapter 1. The moon that forgot to rise. The moon should have risen hours ago. But the sky hung empty, a wound instead of a promise. For 13 nights straight, the heavens had refused to glow. The tides had stilled, the wolves had stopped singing, and somewhere between dusk and despair, the world began to die quietly. The kingdom of ash-silver Kale Riven stood upon the broken walls of Viridon, once the heart of Wolfkind. What had been marble now cracked like bone, what had been a city now breathed only smoke. Below him, the people waited, not for miracles, but for orders that might feel like them. He had been their Alpha since boyhood, their king since war, their ghost since the moon's disappearance. Wind clawed through the ruins, scattering ash that glittered faintly, as if trying to remember light. The wolves in human form bowed their heads, their shadows trembling, shifting for a second before breaking apart. They were forgetting how to be wolves. Every day another lost control, claws dissolving, fur fading, eyes turning dull. The bond between man and moon, the pulse that gave their kind purpose, was thinning like old blood. Kale's second-in-command approached, armor dull with soot. 13 nights, my king, he murmured. The priests say the gods have turned their faces. Kale didn't look away from the horizon. The gods have faces only when they want to be feared. And if this is punishment? Then I'll find the crime worth it, Kale said. The silence before defiance. He waited for the moon anyway. He waited every night. Some part of him believed the light was only lost, not gone, like a lover who had simply taken too long to come home. When the wind stilled entirely, the pack lifted their heads in unison. Nothing, only the hollow throb of a sky refusing them. Kale exhaled. Bring the children inside, he said softly. No wolf will see this sky tonight. As they dispersed, he remained alone. His eyes, pale as frozen rivers, lifted toward nothing and everything. For the first time in years, the Alpha King prayed. But not to the gods. To the moon itself. To the ancient, wordless mother of wolves. And to something else, something even older than prayer. A presence that once touched him in dreams, a voice that whispered his name as if tasting it. He whispered back, find me. The heavens stir far beyond the dying clouds, the divine realm cracked awake. In the halls of endless light, where stars burned in chains, Selene, the goddess of ends, opened her eyes for the first time in centuries. The room around her was made of reflection. Every surface showed her countless faces, each one crying, each one silent. A voice like thunder filtered through the void. The Alpha defies his fate. The moon lies still because of him. Selene's breath clouded the air. Then end him. You are the end. Chains of light uncoiled from her wrists, dissolving into motes. She rose, slender and still, her silver-white hair weightless, her eyes bright enough to blind angels. In the center of the room lay a sword, a blade carved from a fallen moonbeam, its hilt warm with pulse. The voice whispered again, strike the last wolf, break the rebellion, restore the balance. She reached for the weapon, and hesitated. Her reflection in the mirrored floor stared back, a goddess carved to obey. But the face trembled, as if hiding a question. Why does my heart ache for a name I've never learned? She murmured. No answer came, only the weight of duty, sharp as the blade she lifted. The mortal realm that same night, thunder ripped across Viridon though no clouds gathered. Kale turned toward the mountains. A column of light fell, bright, silent, endless, piercing the earth far to the east. Every wolf within range howled once, involuntarily, as if their blood remembered something they didn't. Kale's pulse stumbled. He didn't understand why the sight made him want to kneel. The goddess falls. Selene's descent was not graceful. When divine light touches mortal gravity, even goddesses break. She fell through stars, through memory, through names she hadn't yet earned. When she hit the mortal plane, the impact scorched the forest in a perfect circle, trees crystallized instead of burning, light freezing midair. She woke gasping, lungs desperate for the mortal trick of breathing. Pain lanced through her body. So this was what it felt like to be real. The sword lay beside her, its glow dimmed. For the first time since creation, she felt small and alive. Footsteps approached, careful, human, curious. A child appeared at the edge of the light, eyes wide. Are you a star? the girl whispered. Celine blinked. No, something fallen. The child tilted her head. You fell pretty. She smiled despite herself. Where am I? The Alpha's woods, the child said. He protects us. Alpha? Celine tasted the word like an old melody. When the child offered her hand, Celine hesitated, then took it. The warmth surprised her. It reminded her of something that didn't exist in heaven, kindness without agenda. The Alpha's patrol Kale's scouts found the light before dawn. They moved through the forest with weapons drawn, wolves pacing between shadows. When they reached the crater, they stopped dead. At its center, half buried in ash and silver dust, knelt a woman. Barefoot, dressed in torn white silk, unburned where everything else was scorched. She lifted her head as they approached, and every soldier's instinct faltered. Who are you? One demanded. Celine looked at him with eyes that seemed to remember making the sky itself. I don't know, she lied. I woke here. Kale pushed through his men. When he saw her, something inside him cracked, cleanly, like glass under heat. It wasn't recognition exactly. It was worse. It was remembrance. He stepped closer, hand resting on his blade's hilt. You're not from any tribe, he said. No, she admitted. Then you're a threat. Her lips curved faintly. If I meant harm, you wouldn't still be breathing. One of his lieutenants bristled. Bold words for someone naked in the dirt. Kale raised a hand, silencing him. What's your name? She hesitated. For the briefest instant, 1,000 syllables pressed against her tongue, divine names, ancient titles. But the one that escaped was small, human, trembling. Celine. He repeated it quietly, as if testing how it tasted in his mouth. Celine, he said, you'll come with us. She wanted to refuse. She was here to end him, not follow him. But when she met his eyes, silver ringed with blue, steady, sad, the voice of heaven fell silent in her mind. The wolf and the stranger they rode through dawn, the forest flickering between color and ash. Kale rode ahead, his men cautious behind him. Celine sat on a borrowed horse, cloak wrapped tight, eyes wandering to every trembling leaf. She could feel the pulse of life in everything, a gift the divine rarely noticed. Every breath of the wind whispered the same question, why are you here? When the ruined towers of Viridon came into view, Kale spoke without turning. The people will look at you. Don't speak. Don't promise them hope. They've had enough liars. Celine almost smiled. And you're not one? I stopped lying when the moon stopped rising, he said. There's no one left to impress. The city without a moon inside the city walls, silence ruled. Market stalls stood empty. The great well at the center had frozen mid-pour, the water caught in air like glass. Children watched her pass with wide, untrusting eyes. Kale dismounted and helped her down before she could refuse. His hand brushed hers, a simple touch, but divine memory flared through her like lightning. For a heartbeat, she saw another time, him kneeling, offering blood under a silver sky, whispering her name as if it were prayer. She gasped. The image vanished. Kale frowned. What is it? Just memory, she said softly. Yours, perhaps. He stared at her a moment too long before turning away. You'll stay in the upper tower. Until we know what you are. The moonless night that night, Celine stood at the window of her sham. Watching the empty sky. The world below her was asleep, save for one light burning in the courtyard, Kale's. He stood alone again, face turned upward, as if daring the heavens to answer. She wondered if he knew how beautiful defiance looked in mortal form. And why her chest hurt watching it. When she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of something impossible. A wolf running through silver fields. A man whispering against her temple, if the gods take you, I'll climb the stars myself. Her pulse quickened. Her mortal heart didn't know how to hold such sound. Somewhere deep within her, the sword began to hum. It recognized the man she was meant to kill. And for the first time since creation, a goddess prayed not for obedience, but for confusion. The moon's first flicker just before dawn, the city stirred in awe. A thin sliver of light appeared on the horizon, the faintest crescent, trembling between clouds. The moon, for the first time in 13 nights, had risen halfway. The wolves lifted their heads and howled. Kale looked up from the courtyard, heart-hammering. And far above, in the tower window, Celine pressed a hand to the glass, whispering a name she did not yet remember loving. The world listened, the gods frowned, and destiny, sensing rebellion, began to write in new ink. Chapter 2. The Descent of the Goddess. The breaking of light. In the halls where stars are stored like old prayers, Celine stepped to the edge of heaven and did not look back. The sky opened under her feet. She fell, not like meteors fall, brief and proud, but like a vow released after centuries of obedience. Light wrapped her in burning veils, each one a name she had worn when the world was younger. They slid away as gravity claimed her. Power trimmed itself into smaller shapes, bone, blood, breath, so she could fit inside a mortal hour without tearing it. Pain, new and absolute, stitched itself along every nerve. So this is being alive, she thought, and the thought startled her because gods do not usually narrate their own hurt. The storm thickened. Stars veered to avoid her, sparks flickering as if bowing mid-flight. Somewhere behind the glare a voice, distant, law and thunder, reminded her of her orders. End the Alpha. Restore balance. Do not remember. Then why give me a heart? She asked the void, and the void, polite as ever, did not answer. The last layer of light burned away. She struck the mortal world in a ring of radiance that made the trees try to become crystal to keep from catching fire. The earth gasped, steam rising in a perfect circle, then settled, grateful and scorched. Celine opened her eyes into darkness that smelled of soil and sap and ash. Sound arrived slowly. Drip of thawing frost, twitch of frightened branches, the delicate ceremony of snowfall. Kess landing on singed leaves. Her fingers found the ground. It felt true in a way celestial marble never had. She pushed herself upright. The world shifted, insisting on weight. Blood, hers, slid warm over her forearm, star bright at first, then red as any river. The sight wobbled the horizon. A laugh caught in her throat, half delight, half terror. It's beautiful, she said to no one, aching for the first time in a way that made beauty necessary. Her sword lay at her side, its white edge dulled into moon gray by the fall. When her fingertips brushed the hilt, memory flashed, fast, forbidden. A man kneeling beneath a fat winter moon. Eyes like ringed silver, his mouth shaping a name she could not afford to carry. The image shattered, the hilt cooled, branches rustled. Celine turned. At the crater's rim, a small figure peered over the edge, hair wild, cheeks raw with cold, eyes huge and brave in the way children are when no one has taught them how not to be. Are you an angel? The child whispered. Celine considered the truth and set it gently aside. I fell from the sky, she said. Is that close enough? The girl slid on her stomach, wriggled under a scorched root, and tumbled into the ring of glassy soil with the solemn competence of a foxkit. She brushed ash from her knees and stared, memorizing. You're bleeding. So I am. Celine touched the cut as if learning a new instrument. What do you call it here? Being hurt. And when it stops? Healing. The girl's mouth tilted, proud of the lesson. I'm Yara. Yara, Celine repeated, and watched the name make the air kinder. I'm, a dozen titles pressed to be born. She chose the smallest. Celine. Yara nodded, satisfied. I like that. The child unwrapped a rag from her wrist and offered it, all ceremony. For your arm. Celine bound the cut with hands that remembered weaving constellations and now learned cotton. The fabric smelled of smoke and sun and goat, the aromatics of survival. When she finished, Yara studied her work and approved with a grave little hum. Why did you fall? Yara asked. To end something, Celine said, and felt an abrupt shame at making that sound simple in front of a child. She softened. Or to begin something. Sometimes those are the same. Yara accepted this with the flexibility of the very young. Do you need a grown-up? Celine looked at her palm, where blood had dried in whorls like small galaxies. I think I need a guide. The child beamed. I can be that. But we should go. The Alpha's patrol walks near dawn. And the forest has wolves with no names anymore. Celine listened. Far inside the dark, a chorus strained to become howls and fell short, thin and jagged. It sounded like prayer forgetting its words. Take me to your edge, Celine said. Yara reached for her H. And without doubt, Celine took it, and the warmth of those small fingers constellated everything the fall had cracked. They climbed out of the crater as dawn assembled itself from smoke and frost. The edge of the known snow made a quiet of the world that felt like reverence. Yara led with a confident wobble, explaining everything a goddess had never needed to learn. That's ghost moss. Don't step on it, it remembers. That tree's mad. The lightning married it last summer. If you hear birds stop singing, duck. It's not for you, it's for what wants you. Celine stored the wisdom like coins. The forest listened to Yara too, arching branches just enough to avoid her braid. Mortality had favorites, it seemed. They reached a low ridge where the trees broke. Below, a narrow river stitched silver through dark reeds. Beyond it, the first smoke of morning rose from the edges of a sleeping village. A bell, tired and dutiful, counted the hour like an old man keeping gossip honest. Yara stopped, breath fogging. This is as far as I go when Mama says don't. So now you obey? Not usually, Yara confessed, then squared her shoulders. But the Alpha's patrol doesn't like surprises. The Alpha, Celine echoed, tasting the word again. It fit her teeth too well. Kale, Yara said, with a satisfaction that suggested she would fight whoever argued. He doesn't sleep, he walks. Celine smiled without meaning to. The name changed the air the way Flint changes tinder. Does he keep you safe? He keeps trying, Yara said, pragmatic as dawn. People think trying is the same as failing if it doesn't work right away. That is a god's mistake, Celine murmured. What? Nothing. She knelt to tie the rag tighter, stalling, unsure why her pulse climbed at the thought of one man's footfalls in a world that had hundreds of thousands. Hoofbeats stitched the quiet. Yara's head snapped up, eyes bright. The patrol. Go, Celine said. If there's danger, you're the danger, Yara declared, joyous, and fled into brush as if the forest had just invited her to tea. Celine straightened, alone again except for a thin wind that had learned her name in 1 minute and decided to use it. She waited, very still, letting mortal gravity complete its arguments with her bones. Waiting, Celine discovered, is harder when you have nerves. Men on horseback emerged from the trees across the river, 3, then 7, then a dozen, wolves wearing human shape because the moon had made a habit of them. Cloaks dark, armor dented, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. They moved like a single animal with many hands. At their center rode a man tall enough to shift the horizon's math. He did not glow, he compelled. His hair was raven black, pulled back to seat his face to the work, his jaw bore stubble-like. A warning, his eyes, she felt them before she saw them, held a pale core like winter rivers that refused to yield entirely to ice. Alpha. The word did not happen to him. It happened because of him. He raised a hand. The patrol halted. He dismounted with the clean economy of someone who had been learning how to use his body since before language. His boots sank an inch into snow and found earth anyway. State your presence, he said, low, calm, not yet cruel. The band of humorless light at his throat pulsed once with the signal of a vow bound to blood. My presence, Celine answered, almost smiling at the literal invitation, is newly arrived. Swords half left sheaths. The air gathered itself, bracing for agreement or regret. The Alpha's gaze moved over the scorched ring around the crater that had been a hill. He took in her torn silk, the rag at her wrist, the absence of fear around her mouth. His eyes returned to hers and did not flinch from their brightness. Good men can look at suns. He was not only good, he was practiced. What are you? He asked. There were 1,000 correct errors she could make. She chose a true one. Lost. Something softened around his eyes, just a degree, and the pack behind him swallowed the reflex to threaten. Name, he said. Celine. He tried it once under his breath, weighing it like steel. Satisfied that it could cut, he nodded. I'm Kale Riven. The name arrived inside her like a bell hitting water. The ripples touched places no fall could shake loose. Her knees betrayed her. She masked the tremor by shifting her weight, but he noticed. Of course he noticed. Noticing was how he had survived this long. Our borders broke last night, he said. A column of sky fell into my woods. That usually means trouble. Usually, she agreed. Are you trouble? I could be. He almost smiled. The movement had dust on it, as if he hadn't used the trick in years. Honesty is dangerous here. Then keep me somewhere safe, she said before she could decide not to. A few of his men glanced at each other. One, young, jaw braver than his eyes, spoke. My king, this is a witch's tone. Kale didn't answer him. He studied the crater's smooth rim, then looked again at Celine as if overlaying past and present to see where they refused to align. "Mount up," he said at last. "You ride between me and Oren." To Celine, quieter, "If you mean harm, I'll know it before you do." "Will you?" she asked. He held her gaze. Yes. Something like relief made her reckless. Good. Between wolves they crossed the river at the shallow, water slicing around boots and fetlocks with a sound like glass forgiving itself. The cold bit her calves and offered proof she could catalogue later. Oren, the lieutenant with sunrise scars across his knuckles, handed her a spare CL. Oak without comment. She drew it close. Wool learned her scent and decided to behave. The patrol moved at a pace that assumed the world might ambush them any moment. Discipline existed not to slow them but to make their swiftness reliable. Birds returned to singing around them in increments, testing the new element in their sky, her. Celine matched the rhythm until the forest delivered a memory to her in the shape of a scent. Iron cut with pine, smoke braided with winter. It arrived like a friend, unavoidable, familiar, and the scene unfurled without permission. A courtyard below a broken tower. A man alone under an empty moon. His face upturned, not begging, not bartering, daring. She swayed in the saddle. Kale was there, hand on her knee, steadying her as if the gesture had been negotiated centuries ago. "Breathe," he said, intimate as a commandment. She did. The world agreed to remain where she'd left it. "What did you remember?" he asked. "That you're stubborn," she said. He blinked. A sound left him that wanted to be a laugh and restrained itself into breath. "You don't know me." "Not yet," she said, turning away so he couldn't see how the words cut. Viridon wakes the city rose from forest like a ship that had forgotten how to sail. Wolf banners hung heavy with frost. The gate, half rebuilt, insistently repaired, opened at their king's approach and protested at everyone else. Inside, lives went on because habit is another word for courage. A woman salted a hide with hands that had done the work too long. A boy smoked fish with the intensity of prayer. Men at the training yard dropped wooden blades when they saw the newcomer, picked them up again when Kale's glance reminded them that seeing miracles is not a profession. The patrol dismounted. Oren reached for Celine's reins and thought better of it when the horse decided suddenly to be fond. Kale gestured toward the tower staircase spiraling along the inner wall. "We'll talk where the walls don't listen so much." She followed him up narrow steps. Wind crowded close, eager for gossip. Halfway, a shout rose from the western watch. A quick pattern that made the wolves below pause mid-task. "What is it?" she asked. "Smoke," Kale said without looking back. "Too dark for cooking." He didn't change pace. He was the kind of leader who trusted his lieutenants to put out fires he hadn't lit yet. At the top, the city fell away behind them and the world arrived. Horizon uncluttered, mountain spines like old gods sleeping badly, a sky choosing blue but keeping gray in its pockets for later. Kale leaned both hands on the parapet and stared north, the way men stare at bad weather they plan to walk into. Celine stood beside him. 13 nights, he said, voice low enough to belong to someone who rarely spoke WHER. Anyone could write it down afterward. No moon. The young forget their wolves first. Then the old. Then the ones who believed it couldn't happen to them. If it's punishment, I want to deserve it. If it's a test, I want a better teacher. It's grief, she said before she realized the knowing was hers. Grief in the sky. Something was taken that can't be replaced. It's trying to do math without a number it trusted. He turned his face toward her. How do you know? She could have lied. It would have been so easy to set a story between them like a fence. Instead, she honored the ache that had traveled with her like a stowaway. Because I feel like that, she said. He did not try to comfort her. Relief loosened something under her ribs. She did not want gentleness yet. She wanted gravity. We kept our oaths, he said after a time. The gods taught us how to kneel and we learned instead how to stand. Perhaps they mistook one lesson for the other. And now? She asked. Now I feed my people and sharpen truth. Truth can cut throats. He met her eyes. Then I'll teach it which ones deserve it. The air thickened as if to agree. A bell sounded below, two short, one long. Oren's voice carried, Alpha. The West Ridge. Kale went very still. The stillness itself had a shape, a readiness, a lit fuse deciding whether to burn. He looked at Celine as if measuring whether she would be brick or blade. "Stay in the tower," he said. She held his gaze. "No." The corner of his mouth admitted admiration and hid it again. "Then stay behind me. Until I don't," she said. He didn't argue. He had already learned in one morning what some men take marriages to discover. You do not move a tide by instruction. The moment the world forgot to breathe, they came down the stair fast. Soldiers fell into motion with the relief of men allowed to do something about their fear. Kale took the courtyard at a run. Celine kept pace, cloak snapping. At the gate, smoke licked over the ridge like a slow smile. Oren arrived, out of breath, bow over one shoulder. "Scouts report dark wolves, no sigils, eyes red," he said. "And something else." "Else?" Kale asked. "Like shadow that learned to walk. And it carries cold." Celine's hand found the sword's hilt as if the sword had moved to meet her halfway. The metal hummed, quiet, warning, fond. Kale saw the way the glow at its edge answered her. His face tightened. "You brought a weapon from wherever you fell." "Yes." "Does it know whose side it's on?" "Not yet," she said. "But it remembers how to cut." "Good," he said, already moving. "Because I remember how to point." They cleared the gate. Snow flew. The world funneled into a path between two stands of pine, needles chiming softly as if the trees had opinions about war. The enemy crested the SL. Ope, and the word enemy felt too small. Wolves, yes, but hollowed, coats pulled thin over absence, snarls that didn't warm the air, eyes lit from behind by a red that meant hunger without appetite. Behind them walked a shape that ruined the snow where it stepped not by weight but by correction. As if reality owed it room and paid in frost. Celine's scalp tightened. Not void, no. Something that admired void and practiced. Kale lifted his sword. His pack formed a crescent around him, striking line trembling with anticipation and dread. Then it happened. Celine and Kale turned toward each other in the same breath, pulled by a force neither had named yet and would never again need to. Their eyes met. Silver met starlight. Grief met the thing that makes grief choose to live. Order and defiance, prayer and blade, the first night and the first fire. For an instant, the battlefield forgot what it had come for. Snow hung in the air. Wolves paused mid-snarl, teeth showing without sound. Even the shadow halted as if etiquette required it to witness. The world, exhausted, allowed itself luxury, a gasp. Kale stepped once toward her, as if distance were a personal insult. "Celine," he said, and the way he said the small name made it a title. Her mouth softened around a truth that had been waiting to be said since before they were born. "Kale." The moment broke like a surface tension. The dark wolves lunged. Kale's blade rose. Celine drew hers. Between them, something old and silver flared to life. A bond waking like a deep animal that had slept too long. The battle took its first breath. Chapter 3. The King and the Stranger. The quiet after battle. The wolves buried their dead at dawn. Snow covered the torn ground as if ashamed of what it had witnessed. Kale stood among the bodies without speaking, the light behind his eyes the only thing still burning. Celine watched him from the tower steps. She had fought beside him through the night, light against shadow, breath against unmaking, and now she understood why even gods whispered his name. He carried authority like an old wound. It hurt, but he didn't know how to live without it. The men saluted him and went about the rituals of survival, stacking weapons, tending fires, whispering to the dead so they wouldn't get lonely. Celine had seen armies, celestial and mortal alike, but never one that treated loss as family instead of failure. Kale caught her watching. "You fight well," he said. "Too well for someone who claims no clan." Celine lowered her gaze, feigning humility, not guilt. "The mountains teach a few things." He stepped closer, close enough for her to smell iron, ash, pine. "Which mountains?" She let the pause stretch, then said lightly, "The ones so far east that even the gods forget their names." He street. "You died her," reading the tremor beneath her poise. "You lie beautifully." Her pulse stumbled. "Do you always accuse strangers so easily?" "Only when they fall from the sky wrapped in fire," he said, then turned away before she could answer. The city in winter days blurred into the rhythm of repair. Viridon learned to breathe again. Smoke lifted from chimneys, market bells returned, shy but present. Kale worked among his people, not above them. He helped rebuild roofs, held children while their mothers hammered nails, listened to arguments about rationed salt as if diplomacy began at the dinner table. Celine followed, silent shadow to his stubborn light. He didn't order her to stay, but she did. Watching him lead broke pieces off the picture heaven had painted of him, the defiant beast, the heretic alpha. He was neither. He was simply human, and humanity terrified gods because it kept surviving. At night she walked the ramparts. The moon, faint but visible now, followed her like guilt. Each time she looked up, her chest filled with a strange ache. Why'd I care? Because somewhere in the hollow of her fading divinity, she knew this man had prayed to her once, not as goddess, but as something closer. The Council of Ash 3 nights after the battle, Kale gathered his captains in the ruined hall. Celine sat apart, a guest without title. The dark wolves weren't wild, Oren said. Something bound them. Kale nodded. A new master or an old one returned. Celine's fingers tightened on her cloak. She knew the scent of that power, the cold that wasn't cold, the absence that admired destruction. Heaven had whispered its name before she fell. The void's air. Kale noticed her silence. You know something. She met his eyes. Only that what hunts you now doesn't care who wins. It only cares that the world remembers it exists. Oren scoffed. Prophecy talk. Kale silenced him with a look. Sometimes prophecy is just memory repeating itself. For a heartbeat, Celine saw another version of this room, its walls unbroken, its torches blue-white instead of gold, Kale's armor gleaming like moonlight instead of steel. The vision flickered and was gone. She rose abruptly. I'll take air. Kale followed her out, curiosity outweighing exhaustion. You speak as if you've seen this before. Maybe I have, she said softly. Maybe I dreamed it. The wolf and the fire snow fell again, gentle, deceptive. The courtyard glowed silver under torchlight. Kale leaned against the parapet beside her. Dreams aren't much use to leaders. Dreams built your city once, she replied. He smiled without humor, and tore it down, yet here it stands again. He turned to her fully then, searching her face. You talk like someone who's seen ages, not winters. Celine met his gaze. Perhaps. I've seen both. Something in his expression softened, a recognition too deep for logic. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Someone I lost before the first war ended. She forced a breath past the tightness in her throat. What was her name? I never knew it, he said. Only her eyes. Her heart stuttered. Silver? He blinked. How did you? Celine looked away quickly, hiding tears that burned without permission. Guesswork. Kale didn't press. He only said, if you stay, you'll have to choose sides when war returns. Maybe I already have, she whispered. The dream that night, sleep dragged her into memory that pretended to be dream. She stood beneath a sky on fire. The moon hung low, bleeding light onto a battlefield littered with fallen stars. A man stood at its center, armor cracked, hand outstretched toward her. He looked just like Kale, but older somehow, eternal in grief. Find me again, he said, voice breaking through the roar of dying constellations. Even if the stars die trying. She woke with tears on her face and a name burning behind her teeth. Kalion, the name the gods had erased. The morning after Celine dressed before dawn and stepped onto the balcony. Below, Kale trained with his soldiers, movements exact and spare. Frost glimmered on his hair, the same silver that haunted her dreams. He looked up mid-swing, eyes meeting hers through the chill. For a moment, neither moved. Then he lowered his blade and bowed, small, ironic, almost tender. Celine's fingers gripped the rail. She wanted to call his name, the true one, but the world wasn't ready to remember. Not yet. Chapter 4, The Wolf's Prayer. The dying moon. The moon was fading again. Not vanishing, not gone, just tired. Its light no longer spilled into Veridan's streets. It dripped, thin and uneven, as though the heavens had forgotten how to feed the world properly. Kale watched from the high balcony, jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Below him, the wolves had gathered again, men and women kneeling under the colorless sky, their breath visible in the cold, their eyes hollow with sleepless nights. When the light dimmed completely, a tremor passed through them. The youngest clutched their sides, groaning as their inner beasts flickered. One boy fell to his knees, screaming. His claws began to fade from his fingers mid-shift, leaving his hands raw and bloodied. "Enough," Kale shouted, his voice cutting across the square. The sound alone stopped them, as though authority itself could hold bodies together. But it couldn't, not this time. The healers rushed in, dragging the boy away. The crowd whispered one word that traveled like smoke: curse. Kale turned away before the helplessness in their faces could break him completely. The ritual they forbade inside the temple. The air was heavy with ash and cold wax. The moonstone altar, once radiant, now looked like ordinary rock. The priests stood in a half-circle behind Kale, their robes torn from years of hopeless service. "You can't keep doing this, my king," said Elder Thane, voice rough with age. "The gods hear no prayers now. They've closed their ears to wolves." Kale placed a hand on the altar. "Then I'll make them remember what they've abandoned." Thane hesitated. The blood rite was outlawed after the War of Heirs. It cost more lives than it saved. "I'm not asking for permission," Kale said, unwrapping the bandage on his palm. "I'm asking for silence." He drew his blade, the edge catching the flicker of torchlight. Then, with deliberate calm, he cut his palm open. Blood spilled onto the moonstone, sizzling where it touched the cold surface. The temple walls groaned, air vibrating with something older than speech. Kale bowed his head and whispered, "By the flesh of wolves, by the oath of kings, by the moon that once hurt us, I call you back." The torches dimmed, shadows lengthened, his blood began to spread in perfect circles, glowing faintly silver, as if remembering the moon's color. The priests gasped. One dropped to his knees. "Alpha," Thane said in horror. "You'll bring their wrath down upon us." Kale didn't stop. His voice grew stronger, breaking from chant into plea. "If I am defiant, punish me alone. But if I am faithful, light the sky once more." Nothing answered, only the sound of dripping blood and the faint, pitiful wind that wandered through broken glass windows. Kale's shoulders slumped. He was not a man used to praying. It didn't suit him. He commanded, he fought, he bled, but never begged. Tonight, he had done all three. And the sky stayed silent. The witness from the shadows at the doorway, Celine, had watched it all. She hadn't meant to follow him. She had only sensed the pull, the same gravitational ache that came whenever Kale's pain reached the heavens she had abandoned. The goddess inside her stirred uneasily. The heavens had warned her that mortals were pride wrapped in fur and bone, that alpha kings were dangerous, beautiful creatures who mistook rebellion for faith. But standing there, watching him bleed for people who no longer believed, Celine saw no arrogance. She saw devotion, the kind of devotion that even gods had forgotten how to feel. Her hand tightened around the column beside her. The sword strapped to her back thrummed faintly, recognizing its other half in Kale's blood. She took a step forward without meaning to. The first touch Kale swayed slightly. Too much blood loss, too much disappointment. The moonstone no longer glowed. He pressed his palm against it one last time, muttering through his teeth, "I tried." Celine moved. Before logic could stop her. Her fingers closed over his wrist. The reaction was instant. Silver light erupted between their joined hands, wild, alive, unrestrained. The moonstone cracked down the middle, splitting like a heart learning to beat again. Kale froze. The air around them vibrated, pulling strands of her hair upward as if gravity itself forgot its purpose. Celine's breath hitched. What? The blood on his palm evaporated, transforming into streaks of light that curled around her arm. When they touched her skin, her divine mark flared beneath the human disguise she wore. Kale's eyes widened as faint sigils shimmered on her collarbone, celestial runes that no mortal language could name. He whispered, "What are you?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The surge of power rushing between them was almost unbearable. Her pulse matched his. The silver light wrapped around their bodies in a spiral, circling like a slow dance neither of them had rehearsed. Outside, the night broke. The moon flared to life. Half of it, only half, but enough for wolves across Viridon to lift their heads and howl. The sound shook the temple windows. Kale stumbled back, panting, his eyes glowing faintly in response. Celine stepped away too, clutching her arm where the light had touched her. The runes faded slowly. For the first time since her fall, she looked frightened. Kale's voice came out hoarse. You did this. No, she said. We did. What the moon saw outside, wolves flooded into the square, howling in awe. The moon's light fell across their faces, and for a brief, sacred heartbeat, every single one of them felt their beast stir again. Not fully, not freely, but enough to remember what freedom once tasted like. Kale walked out into the light. The people knelt instinctively. He lifted a hand, refusing their worship. Stand, he said. This light isn't mine. It belongs to all of you. They obeyed. Behind him, Selene emerged from the temple, her face pale but radiant. The moonlight clung to her like recognition. The crowd murmured, some in fear, others in wonder. An omen, a blessing, a witch, a savior. Kale turned to her. You came here with purpose, didn't you? Selene met his gaze. Every purpose changes when it meets truth. What truth is that? That mortals can do what gods have forgotten. Kale frowned. Which is, love something enough to bleed for it. The words hit him like an arrow drawn straight from his own heart. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the wolves' distant cries like a hymn. The question of faith later, inside the hall again, Kale sat at the long table, the weight of leadership pressing heavier than his armor. Selene stood near the fire, watching flames curl in colors she had never seen before, blue and gold, dancing like they had souls. You shouldn't have interfered, Kale said finally. Would you rather the moon stayed dead? She asked. I'd rather not owe you. Selene smiled faintly. Then don't. He glanced at her. You're not afraid of me. I was born knowing worse things. Then you know what happens to those who hold secrets in my court. Yes, she said softly. They get noticed. Kale looked away, exhaling sharply through his nose, a near laugh. You talk like a poet, not a traveler. Maybe the mountains are full of poets. Maybe you're full of lies. Selene met his eyes steadily. Maybe both can be true. Their silence afterward wasn't empty. It was charged, a hum beneath the skin, the echo of a moment when moonlight had chosen both of them. The goddess remembers pain that night. Selene couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed the servants had offered, staring at the faint beam of moonlight cutting across the floor. Her skin still shimmered faintly where Kale's blood had touched her. He shouldn't have survived that ritual. No mortal could channel divine energy directly, yet Kale had done it without hesitation. Without fear. Her memories came in fragments, like glass pieces rearranging themselves, a battlefield drowned in silver fire. A man kneeling, blood on his lips. Her own voice whispering his name as light swallowed them both. She sat up, trembling. The sword by her bedside hummed softly, as if waiting for confession. Who were you to me? She whispered to the night. The moon outside flickered, uncertain. The wolf's solitude across the citadel. Kale stood at the balcony, bare-chested, hands braced against cold stone. The light had returned, but so had questions. He'd seen power before, mages, healers, even ancient wolves blessed by the old moon, but nothing like her. When she touched him, it hadn't felt foreign. It had felt familiar, like hearing a song he'd forgotten he wrote. He looked down at his palm, healed perfectly. Silver veins shimmered faintly beneath the skin, glowing whenever he thought about her. He closed his fist and whispered, Selene. The wind answered, I remember you. The breaking point 2 days later, the priests returned to him with more grim news. The lights fading again, my king. Whatever miracle occurred, it wasn't complete. Kale dismissed them quietly. He already knew. He could feel it. The bond that had sparked in the temple was still there, but it flickered like an unfinished heartbeat. And somehow, deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't the moon that was dying. It was her. The prayer that wasn't meant for God's night fell heavy. Snow gathered again over Viridon. Kale walked alone through the sleeping streets, boots silent on stone. He passed the square where wolves had howled in gratitude, now silent once more. He stopped under the moon's frail light, closed his eyes, and whispered, not to gods, not to heavens, but to her. If you are what I think you are, don't vanish again. Not yet. Far above him, in her chamber, Selene sat awake, hearing the same words in her dreams. The moon flared once, brighter than before, like a pulse shared between two beings who didn't yet know what they were to each other. And for the first time in centuries, the goddess of endings wished for something she was forbidden to want, a beginning. The wound closes by light alone. The moon flickers, half awakens. He looks at her differently after that. Chapter 5. The blade made of his soul. The song under snow night laid a hush over Viridon like a hand. Fires guttered, doors latched. Wolves dreamed of running and woke with their paws still human. Celine did not sleep. Something called to her through the frost, not a voice, not a word. A note, struck once and held forever, vibrating through the timber of her ribs. She followed it out of the tower, over the sleeping courtyard, through the postern gate that remembered mercy. Wind slid past with a conspirator's care. Moonlight, thin but stubborn, stitched a path across the drifts. Beyond the wall the forest waited, its trunks like cathedral columns, its floor scattered with bone-white branches. The note grew clearer as she walked, acquiring harmonics: grief, vow, ember, salt. A heartbeat began to thread the sound, slow and iron-willed, the rhythm of a man who refuses to die before the work is finished. Her breath fogged and tore. Mortal lungs have limits. She ignored them. The trees opened around a shallow bowl of earth blackened by an old impact. Frost flowers ringed the crater, each petal catching moonlight in a language only ice can read. At the center lay a weapon, half buried, as if the world had tried to hide it from itself. Celine knelt. White metal, edge that swallowed starlight, hilt wrapped in grayed leather. The blade did not gleam so much as witness. Now that she was close, the note resolved. No longer a single-held tone but two voices braided, one dark, one silver, the way rivers braid when the land permits grace. Her fingers hovered. Mortal caution warred with divine inheritance. She touched the hilt. The forest inhaled. The sword woke. Memory as a wound that opens clean. The first rush was heat. Not of fire, but of blood, realizing it remembers a path it was forbidden to walk. Light flooded her knuckles, traveled her arm, threaded the scars that weren't there yesterday. Then came the visions. Not images, rooms you could walk into. Doors blew inward and she stepped through. A moonlit forge without walls. Stars banked like coals. The anvil was a fallen meteor, the hammer a promise. She stood there and she did not stand alone. He was there, Kale, younger but already carved by command, eyes not blue, not gray, but the precise color of distance. Bare to the waist, shoulders trembling with restraint, hands bound to the stone by bands of light. Say it, she heard herself tell him, herself but not the woman who now knelt in snow. A version of her crowned in stillness and sorrow, a goddess who had not yet fallen, voice a braided river. Kale met her gaze without flinching. Take it, he said. If this is the price, then spend me. Your pack will need a king, she warned. They'll need a moon more. The forge flared. A filament of light unraveled from his chest. No pain, only weight, the hush of permission, and spun into her hands. It burned cold and bright and true. She laid that living thread on the anvil. Hammer fell. Every strike rang the name she had never been allowed to keep, Kalion, shaping soul into edge. The filament flattened, lengthened, became a blade that remembered the hand it left. When it cooled, it didn't cool to steel. It cooled to oath. She lifted the sword and it sang. Not violence. Vow. Forgive me, she whispered. For what? He asked. For making a weapon of the best part of you. Make it sharp, he said. Then it won't suffer. The memory cracked along a seam the present could not bear and the forest spilled back into her lungs. She was on her knees again, fingers locked around the hilt, eyes burning, heart a trapped bird battering the bars of bone. The sword's song softened. It sounded like a heartbeat resting its head on her open palm. What a blade knows. Celine cradled the weapon the way a mother cradles a child she fears she does not deserve. Moonlight feathered along the edge and pulled up a lick of frost smoke. I took you from him, she said aloud, the confession clouding the cold. I turned an act of love into a blade meant to end the life that made it. The sword answered in pressure and pulse, untranslatable but clear. I am what he gave me permission to be. She stood, the crater groaning faintly as if relieved of a secret's weight. The steel, or whatever diviner thing it was, balanced perfectly, no want of hand, no strain of wrist. When she tested the edge against the air, the world parted for it politely. Now the other truth approached, its boots loud even in snow. If she faced Kale with this drawn, the blade would not hesitate. Vows do not indulge in decision. They keep their shape under fire. Not tonight, she told it, throat tight. The note settled into a hum like a cat deciding to be kind. Snow whispered behind her. Celine turned, blade angled low. Kale stood at the rim, cloak haloed in rhyme, eyes shining with something that wasn't only moonlight. He had followed her without sounding like pursuit. Of course he had. His gaze dropped to the weapon and flinched, no fear, recognition so pure it hurt to witness. You found it, he said. You left it, she answered. They stared at each other across a ring of frost that had only ever wanted to be water. The argument for and against mercy. He slid down the slope, boots careful on the glassed soil, stopping an arm's reach away. From here she could smell him again, iron and pine and the exhaustion of a man who has been good too long. What do you remember? He asked. Enough to hate myself, she said. Enough to hate the ones who told me to forget. He nodded once, like a soldier marking a tactic he could use. Then we share an enemy. You think the gods are your enemy? Her laugh came thin and brittle. They're too busy fearing what you resurrect just by refusing to bend. That fear is enemy enough. He extended his hand. Will you let me touch it? The request startled her. It will hurt. I have a high opinion of my pain. She turned the blade, offering the flat. His palm found the steel. The hum leapt, recognition turned rapture. Light climbed his fingers and drew his old sigils out of hiding, inked there by their Chapter 4 miracle. His eyes shuttered, his jaw relaxed into a softness she had not yet seen on him. A man granted a homecoming he hadn't dared to book passage for. It doesn't feel like a weapon, he said. What does it feel like? Like the part of me that wanted to believe the world wasn't finished with us. Silence widened to make room for what that could mean. He opened his eyes. Can it kill me? Yes. Will it? Only if I forget why you let me make it. He smiled, small, unbearable. Then I remain inconvenient to murder. Names that won't stay buried. They walked back together beneath trees, practicing how to be quiet. Every third step she had to remind her body it could be warmed by company without calling that weakness. The sword rode her hip in a stranger's scabbard and rode his gaze as if it had always belonged near him. Your lie about the eastern mountains, he said, conversational as a knife sharpening itself, was tidy. Thank you. Will you replace it with a truth? Which one? The one that keeps making the air change when I say your borrowed name. She could dodge. She had practiced. Instead she gave him the thing that had been burning to be held. In the dream I had last night, she said, you stood under a burning moon and told me to find you again, even if the stars died trying. His breath left him. The forest listened harder. We were at a forge, she went on. Not of iron, of light. I made this. She touched the blade and it answered, from you. He stopped walking. The pause made the world reorganize around it. I remember the room, he said slowly. Not with eyes, with marrow. Then, say your true name, she whispered before she could protect herself from the request. Let me hear it in your mouth. The moon went still. His throat worked. The gods cocked their heads, ready to make examples of hope. He smiled without humor. That's the trouble, isn't it? Names and their games. He shook his head. Not yet. She swallowed pain and pride in the same motion. Cowardice looks good on you. It's not cowardice, he said. It's keeping the sky from catching fire before my people have winter grain. She wanted to tell him grain burns anyway when gods choose spectacle. Instead she said, prudent. Infuriating. Occupational hazard. In which the blade picks a side. They came to the river. It had the good manners to freeze slow where the current deepened so crossing could remain a ritual rather than a test. On the far bank something moved, just one shadow at first, then many, like a rumor learning to multiply. Wolves, starved of moon, halos of red behind their eyes. And behind them, walking where snow refused to hold a print, a figure that wore cold like a crown. Kale put himself between Celine and the ridge before his mind finished articulating the threat. The sword flared, asking to be named, to be pointed, to be spent. Let me, she said. I thought you were here to watch, he answered. I was sent to end you, she said. Watching was me arguing with orders. This, she lifted the blade, is me arguing with fate. He didn't stop her. She raised the weapon, point lowered, not to threaten but to invite. Light collected along the edge, thickening into a narrow weather front. The first dark wolf lunged. She cut air, nothing more, and the air agreed to cut wolf. The creature fell apart into snow that remembered being fur and then decided to be water. Mercy, she murmured, horrified and grateful. It unmakes gently. The shadow thing on the ridge inclined a head it had made for the occasion. Pretty, it said without sound, and the word rimmed the trees. Bring the king. Bring the blade. Become a single problem. Kale braced, attention split between enemy and the woman the enemy had been designed to use. Back, he said to her, not command but choreography. She stepped alongside him instead. The wolves came in a rush. Kale's sword answered with algebra, angles that solved problems decisively. Celine's blade sang counterpoint, unwriting what shouldn't exist, sparing blood where it could. Between them a rhythm emerged old enough to embarrass the gods who had claimed to invent it, protection as a duet. In 36 heartbeats the slope lay quiet except for steam rising like ghosts who weren't angry, only surprised. The shadow laughed once, pure delight, offended and charmed. Later, it promised the cold, and sealed itself into ordinary dark. Kale's chest heaved. Celine's hands shook. Their shoulders touched, and the jolt that rode that small contact almost made the sword slip from her fingers. Are you hurt? He asked, already checking before the answer could lie. Only with wanting things I shouldn't, she said. Likewise, he said, and she was briefly undone by the relief of being in the same sentence as him. Shelter is a verb. They reached Viridon at first light. The gate guards stared at the weapon as if looking at a story realized and regretting none of it. Inside, the city moved differently when the Alpha returned unbroken, work faster, laughter permitted, sorrow obeying its lanes. Kale guided her to the old library, a ruined roof patched with canvas, shelves blackened and stubborn. He cleared a table with one sweep, spread a cracked map. Assume the enemy isn't wolves or gods, he said. Assume it's hunger that learned a trick. How do we starve it? Celine set the blade down with ritual care and leaned over the map until her shoulder met his. She smelled parchment rot in him. It eats notice, she said. Attention. Ah, it wants us to sing about it, even when we curse. Then we deny it speech. We'll need silence that isn't erasure, she said, eyes shining with irony. The kind that shelters. Can you do that? His voice was softer, almost hoarse. I was made to, she said, and finally, owned it without flinching. But I'll need an anchor. His hand closed around her wrist where light still slept under skin. Take mine. The sword brightened on the table, pleased as a dog that has realized the gods of the household are speaking. The mercy of not saying it, yet night again. Snow again. The city a low constellated thing. On the tower, they stood close enough for heat to practice on skin. The weapon lay between them, a thin moonstorm at rest. Celine, he said, the name careful, a cup carried too full. If I asked you to leave, would you? Yes, she said, and then I would fail to obey. He smiled into the dark. We agree at last. On failing? On staying. Silence widened. In it, 1,000 choices nested like birds waiting for spring. She lifted the sword, laid it flat across both their palms. The metal grew warm, the note changed key. To anyone watching they would have looked like two people sharing a burden. To the world itself they looked like a word learning how to be plural. Tomorrow, she said, I'll tell you the rest. Tomorrow, he agreed, I'll be the man who survives it. She wanted to say his true name. She touched the brink of it, felt the sky tense to listen. She swallowed it back like a sob that had learned poise. The moon approved, brighter for a moment, then shy again. Far off, the ridge answered with a whisper like a door asking to be opened. The shadow had not forgotten. Neither had the gods. Neither had the vow hidden inside a blade that used to be a man. Chapter 6. The night he called her by her true name, the storm before by dusk, Viridon's air tasted of iron. The wolves felt it first, fur prickling beneath skin, breath shallow, eyes flicking skyward as if expecting fire instead of snow. Kale stood on the tower parapet, watching the clouds spin in opposite directions, unnatural, deliberate. Storms shouldn't think, but this one did. Celine joined him without a sound. Her cloak shimmered faintly, the moonlight unable to decide whether to hide or worship her. The sword, the one forged from his soul, hung at her hip. They're coming again, Kale said. Not wolves this time, Selene murmured. What hunts now was made in heaven and forgotten there. Can we kill it? She hesitated. You can't kill what doesn't believe in dying. But we can remind it why it should. Kale's mouth curved, half grim, half wonder. You speak like someone who's done that before. I have, she said. Once. It cost me everything. He turned, studying her face, the kind of look that stripped lies down to their bones. Then why are you here? Because I can't watch you die for the gods' amusement. The first strike lightning fell in spirals, not lines. The storm cracked open, and from it poured shadows shaped like angels, burning gold wings rotted black at the edges. They struck the city walls with a sound like choral screams. Kale shouted orders. Hold the line. Shields up. Eyes on me. His wolves obeyed instantly, shifting mid-stride, claws carving sigils in the snow. They met the divine storm with teeth and steel. Selene lifted her sword. The air bent around it. The first angel lunged, she moved faster. One sweep of her blade turned radiance into silence. The body fell, hollow, unblooded. Kale saw it and froze for half a heartbeat. You're not mortal. I never said I was. Another surge of winged light dove for him. He parried with his silver-edged blade but not fast enough, feathers like molten glass sliced across his chest. Blood bloomed crimson, steaming in the cold. Selene's scream split the night. She spun, impaling the creature before it could finish him, and the wound it left screamed back with her, divine energy clashing with mortal blood. Kale fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Selene, she dropped beside him, hands glowing, trying to stem the bleeding. Don't speak. He laughed weakly. You command even the dying. Her eyes burned. I command you to live. The forbidden name the world narrowed to 2 heartbeats, one fading, one frantic. Selene pressed her palm to his wound. The power inside her roared for release, but the gods had chained her voice. She could heal only if she broke their law. To do that, she would need to hear her true name. Kale's gaze locked onto hers. Tell me what to do. You can't, she whispered. The gods forbade it. I've never been good at following gods. He reached up, fingers trembling, tracing the curve of her jaw. You said once you made this blade from me. I did. Then I am already part of you. He smiled, a small, ruinous thing. That means your name belongs to me, too. Kale, don't. He leaned closer, voice breaking with pain and awe. Lunara. The name hit the world like a sunrise. The storm screamed. The ground cracked. Every wolf in Viridon howled. Every angel burned white and vanished. Selene's body arched as the word tore through her. Silver fire burst from her veins, racing up her throat, exploding in her eyes. The chains that had bound her voice shattered with a sound like bells made of lightning. Kale gasped as the light passed through him, the wound in his chest sealing in a blaze of gold. Selene, Lunara, collapsed into his arms, shaking, tears of light spilling down her cheeks. He held her tight. What did I do? You remembered me, she whispered. You broke heaven to do it. The awakening the moon pulsed brighter than it had in centuries, painting every surface in silver flame. The air smelled of rain before creation. Selene stood, barely steady, her glow dimming to something human enough for him to touch. The sigils on her skin gleamed faintly like constellations reborn. She looked at Kale with a mix of terror and wonder. You've bound yourself to me now. When the gods realize, they already have, Kale said, glancing at the heavens, where the clouds began to twist inward, forming a vast eye of light. Let them come. You don't understand. You've made me whole again, and that means every divine thing hunting me knows where I am. He smiled, blood still drying on his armor. Good. Let them try. Selene's voice trembled. Kaleon? He froze. She had spoken his forgotten name. And the world changed again. The air filled with threads of silver and shadow intertwining, binding them. Their auras merged, becoming a storm contained within 2 bodies. You shouldn't know that, he whispered. I remember everything now, she said softly. The forge, the vow, the night you gave me your soul so the moon would live. Her eyes glistened. You weren't supposed to survive. I told you once, he said, I'm inconvenient to kill. They both laughed then, quiet, broken laughter that sounded like relief after centuries of grief. The gods stir far above, the heavens convulsed. Voices older than stars thundered, the Alpha has spoken the unspoken. The goddess has awakened. The balance breaks. Celine looked skyward. They'll come themselves next time. Kale's hand brushed hers. Then we'll greet them together. She met his gaze. Heart aching. You don't understand what that means. He took her hand fully, fingers interlocking. I don't need to. I just need you. For a moment, the world was quiet again. The storm faded. The moon steadied, whole. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the deep inhale of something divine preparing to descend. The choice later, when the city slept beneath its resurrected moon, Kale and Celine stood in the temple ruins. The moonstone altar, the one that had cracked under their joined power, now glowed whole again, humming softly like a creature dreaming. Celine traced its surface. They'll demand a sacrifice to restore balance. Kale stepped behind her, close enough that his breath warmed the back of her neck. Then let them. I've given before. She turned, eyes bright with both fury and love. Not this time. If one of us dies, the light dies with us. Then we don't die. It isn't that simple. It never is, he said, cupping her face. But you said mortals do what gods forget. We love enough to bleed. So if that's the price again, she silenced him with her lips, soft, desperate, sacred. The kiss burned like prayer and promise. When they pulled apart, she whispered, then let them hear us howl. The prophecy rewritten far beyond sight, in the heavens they had defied, the threads of fate trembled. The tapestry that had once dictated life and death began to rewrite itself, not by divine hand, but by two hearts that had refused to stay apart. A single line burned across it in silver flame. When the Alpha speaks her name, gods fall silent. Chapter 7. The gods descend. The sky that screamed morning came late. The sun rose trembling, its edge flickering red, as if afraid to shine on Viridon. Wolves woke restless, their senses prickling with dread they couldn't name. Then came the first sound, not thunder, but trumpets, blaring from a sky that had forgotten mercy. Kale looked up from the citadel walls. The clouds above the city cracked apart, light bursting through like torn silk. From within poured beings not born of stars, but of judgment. They descended in formations, thousands of them. Wings of glass and gold, faces shrouded in fire. Celestial beasts followed. Serpents made of lightning, lions whose roars bent mountains. Every heart in Viridon stopped beating at once. The heavens had come for war. The first commandment of wrath. The air split open in front of Kale. A figure stepped through, a god of old light, tall and terrible, his eyes void of emotion. His armor gleamed like the surface of the sun. Alpha of mortals, the god said, his voice the sound of every bell tolling at once. Your defiance ends here. The soul you carry does not belong to flesh. Kale's hand found his sword. Then come take it. The god's wings flared. You were warned. To love a goddess is to unmake balance. You are an echo that should never have learned to speak. Before Kale could respond, another light cut through the storm, a second being descending faster, burning crimson instead of gold. It wasn't an angel. It was a god slayer, forged from divine betrayal. And at its head rode Lucian, Kale's brother, the Alpha cursed to serve heaven. The brother of the void. Lucian dismounted the fiery beast beneath him, boots sinking into molten snow. His armor was black glass, his eyes ringed in white flame. Kale, he said, his tone smooth and venomous. Still kneeling to no one, I see. Kale's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have come. Lucian's grin was all teeth. You left me no choice. The gods offered redemption. They said if I bring them your head, they'll break my curse. Kale's voice dropped to a whisper. You sold your soul for theirs. Lucian shrugged. You gave yours to a goddess. At least I chose something that still exists. Celine stepped forward then, radiant even in shadow. Lucian Riven, I remember you. He froze, mask cracking for an instant. You shouldn't. You were there, she said softly. At the forge. You begged him not to give me his soul. Lucian's face twisted. And I was right. Look at what your love has done. Wolves born without shadows, a moon bleeding itself dry. The bleeding moon above them, the sky turned crimson. The moon's silver glow dimmed, replaced by a deep red that bled into the clouds. Rivers mirrored it. The wolves howled not in worship, but in fear. Celine's breath hitched. They're using the moon against me. They've corrupted it. Kale reached for her hand. Then take it back. Her eyes glowed white hot. The ground trembled. I can't, not without losing control. Kale's grip tightened. Then lose it. I'll find you. Lightning struck the fortress, splitting the highest tower in half. Fire poured from the wound in the sky as celestial beasts crashed into the courtyard. The first wave of angels descended, swords burning with divine flame. Kale's wolves met them head-on, fangs against light, flesh against glory. The clash shook the world. Alpha and goddess Selene rose above the battlefield, her hair fanning like silver flame, her voice shaking the heavens. I was your silence once. No longer. Wings of light unfurled from her back, fractured, radiant, perfect in their imperfection. Each feather shimmered between divine and mortal, between creation and rebellion. She raised her sword, the weapon born of Kale's soul, and swung it skyward. The heavens screamed. Each strike sent shockwaves that turned angels to ash mid-flight. Their halos dimmed. Their songs broke into sobs. Kale, below, fought like a force of nature, moving through gods and monsters alike, his blade drip ing with red and gold. Every kill left trails of fire that refused to die, marking his path as legend. But even as they won, the sky grew darker. The bleeding moon wept rivers of scarlet light that fell like rain, burning holes through rooftops and skin alike. The wrath of the heavens Lucian charged, his sword made of starfire. You've doomed us both, brother. Kale met him mid-swing. The clash was thunder. The air fractured under the weight of blood and memory. I didn't doom us, Kale growled. You did, when you bowed. Lucian's blade caught Kale's arm, slicing deep. Kale didn't flinch. He slammed his shoulder into his brother, forcing him back. You were the best of us. How did you become this? Lucian laughed, eyes wide with divine madness. You gave your soul to the moon. I gave mine to the sun. We both burned for love, we just chose different fires. Their swords met again. Sparks became comets. Every strike echoed like prophecy. Selene saw them from above, two brothers tearing the world apart. The sight cracked something inside her that even divinity couldn't mend. She descended, voice trembling. Enough. Her power rippled outward in a wave of silver light. Every creature, mortal, divine, damned, fell still. Lucian turned to her, sneering. And what are you now, goddess? Heaven's traitor or man's pet? Selene's wings spread, something you could never understand. She lifted her sword, and the moon answered. The red eclipse for one heartbeat, time itself knelt. Every river turned still, every star dimmed. The moon bled fully red, its reflection covering the world in crimson. The air tasted like iron and longing. Selene's body blazed like the first sunrise. The sigils on her skin flared, ancient words awakening, love, rebellion, eternity. Kale stared at her, awe and terror warring in his chest. Selene? She looked down at him, eyes wide and wet with light. It's not me anymore. It's everything. He stepped closer, ignoring the divine fire spreading around them. Then let everything burn. And together, Alpha and Goddess, they struck. Their combined blow tore through heaven's armies. The divine ranks shattered, wings folding, stars dying. The gods themselves screamed, their perfect order broken by the one thing they never understood, love freely chosen. When the silence falls when it was over, the world was too quiet. Ash rained instead of snow. The moon hung above, still red but steady, no longer bleeding, just watching. Kale dropped to one knee, exhausted. Selene landed beside him, trembling, the light fading from her skin. He caught her before she fell. Breathe, he whispered. I can't, she said weakly. The power, it's too much. It's using me. He held her tighter. Then let me take it. You can't. It's divine. He smiled faintly. So are you. The end of heaven far above, in the ruins of heaven, the gods watched the aftermath through broken veils of light. Their voices shook, not with rage, but with fear. The Alpha has tasted divinity. The goddess has remembered her mortal heart. If they live, the world will forget us. And so, they made their final decree, if one breathes, both must fall. Chapter 8. The Fall of the Alpha King. The moment heaven broke, the battle that had ended the gods did not end cleanly. Lightning still crawled across the clouds like veins of an angry corpse. The moon hung above Viridon, red, trembling, dying. And at the center of the battlefield, Kale Riven stood alone beneath its fading light, his sword buried in the blackened earth, his breath coming in ragged gasps. All around him, the world was smoke and ruin, ashen wings, charred ground, rivers glowing with the last whispers of celestial fire. The wolves had retreated, wounded but alive. The gods' armies had fallen silent. Only one sound remained, the low, cruel hum of divine flame gathering again above. Selene, Lunara, knew that sound. It was the voice of heaven preparing to erase what it could not control. She turned toward him, screaming through the storm, "Kale, move." He looked up just as the sky split open, and a beam of white fire fell. The divine strike had hit him before he could raise his blade. The force threw him backward, shattering stone, cracking the very ground where he stood. His armor melted like wax. His body convulsed, engulfed in light that wasn't fire but judgment. Selene ran to him, the air burning her lungs, the heat scalding even her celestial skin. She dropped to her knees beside him and pulled him into her arms. His eyes, once clear as rivers of moonlight, were now glazed with pain. His breathing was shallow, broken. "Stay with me," she whispered. He tried to smile, but blood slid from his lips. Always, above them, the heavens roared, voices ancient and merciless. The Alpha stole from the divine flame. The mortal must be unmade. The goddess must watch. Selene's tears turned to silver where they hit his chest. "Enough. You've taken everything already." But the light only grew brighter, curling downward, ready to strike again. The moon's bargain. Selene lifted her face to the bleeding sky. "I was yours once," she cried, her voice echoing across worlds. "Your silence, your weapon, your obedient child, no more." Her wings unfurled in full, 10 spans of pure radiance. "If you want him, take me instead." The storm faltered. The gods hesitated. And then, somewhere between the clouds and eternity, the moon itself answered. A low, mournful hum spread across the heavens, a sound like sorrow learning how to sing. The moon's red light began to fade, shifting toward silver again. Trembling as if in agony, Kale stirred weakly. "What are you doing?" "Buying you time," she said. "Selene, don't speak." Her palm pressed against his heart, and her other hand reached toward the moon. "I offer my divinity, my power, my light. Take it, just let him live." The price of a goddess. The moon wept. Its light poured down like water, enveloping her, drowning her in its brilliance. The air filled with silver mist, cold and sweet. Selene gasped as the divinity began to leave her body, drawn upward, piece by piece, strand by strand. The sigils on her skin dimmed, fading like dying constellations. Her wings burned, feathers dissolving into light. The gods screamed in protest. "Foolish child, you cannot trade what was never yours." She cried out in pain, her voice echoing like broken bells. "It was never yours either." The sky convulsed. The stars went dark, one by one. The moon's glow dimmed further, shrinking, curling inward like an old wound reopening. Kale, half-conscious, reached for her hand. "Selene, stop, you'll die," she smiled faintly. "So will you, if I don't." He shook his head weakly. "I was ready to die when I gave you my soul. And I was ready to live when you gave it." The heavens mocked. The gods' laughter rolled across the horizon, terrible, hollow, endless. "Look upon your mortal, goddess. Watch your love fall like the rest of them." The last of their fire gathered, swirling into a spear of pure light, a final act of cruelty. Selene turned, shielding Kale's body with her own. The spear struck her square in the back. The explosion swallowed the field. The world turned white. When the light receded, she was on the ground beside him, trembling, her skin scorched and glowing faintly. The wound had burned straight through her, but she was still alive, barely. Kale stirred, blind from the brightness. "Selene, where?" "I'm here," she whispered. Her hand brushed his cheek, fingers shaking. "You're safe. You shouldn't be." She smiled softly. "You always say that." He laughed, choked, and coughed blood. "You stole their fire." "No," she murmured. "I gave it back." The death of the moon. The heavens began to dim. Stars flickered out, one by one, like candles snuffed by a cold hand. And then the moon, great and luminous, shuddered. Its surface cracked with streaks of silver fire, like veins of lightning breaking from within. Selene looked up, eyes wet with light. "It's dying with me." Kale's hand found hers again. "Then let it die knowing why." She leaned down and pressed her forehead to his. "I used to think love made us weak," she whispered. "Now I know, it's the only thing that ever made us gods." The moon cracked completely, releasing a shockwave of light that rolled across the land. Every creature, wolf, man, bird, god, felt it. Every hair. T stopped for one breath, remembering something it had forgotten. That divinity was just love too big for one body to contain. When the light faded, the moon was gone. Only a silver halo remained where it had hung, shimmering faintly like a scar on the sky. The last words Kale tried to rise, but his strength failed. He pulled her closer, voice barely a whisper. "Don't leave me." Celine smiled faintly. "I'm not leaving, I'm just becoming smaller. So I can fit beside you." Her glow dimmed, her pulse slowing. "The moon will rest now. It's your turn to keep watch." He kissed her hand, tears mingling with blood. "And if you fade, then find me again," she said, echoing the vow from her dreams. "Even if the stars die trying." Her eyes closed. Her body turned to light, dissolving into 1,000 silver fragments that floated upward, merging with the night. Kale reached after them, his fingers brushing the air where she had been. A single feather of light drifted down, landing on his palm. He closed his fist around it. The wind whispered her name. And the Alpha King, broken, burning, beloved, fell to his knees beneath the sky that had just lost its moon. Chapter 9. The Birth of the Silver Night. The light that wouldn't die. Silence stretched across the battlefield like a shroud. Ash drifted, the rivers steamed, and at the center of the ruin, beneath a sky with no moon, Kale held Celine's fading form in his arms. Her body was almost weightless now, neither flesh nor flame. Threads of silver light spilled from her skin like mist, wrapping around his hands, his chest, his throat. Every breath he took pulled more of her into him. "No," he whispered, "don't." Celine's voice was barely air. "I have to." Her hand touched his heart. "If the moon dies with me, you'll have no light left. So I'll leave it here." He shook his head, tears streaking his soot-stained face. "I don't want a light. I want you." She smiled softly. "Then carry both." And then she broke. Not like glass, like dawn. Her body became a surge of silver radiance that poured into him, wrapping around his chest and racing through his veins. He screamed as the light entered him, too much for mortal bone, too vast for blood to hold. The air around them rippled, stones lifting from the ground, every shadow trembling as if bowing. Celine's voice whispered one last time inside his mind, "You were never meant to serve the moon, Kale. You were meant to become it." The Alpha of the Silver Night. The fire died. The wind stilled. Kale fell forward onto his hands, his skin burning, his body splitting open with light. Where blood had once flowed, silver poured instead. His eyes snapped open, glowing brighter than any star still brave enough to look down on him. Every breath he took turned the ash to frost. Airy heartbeat sent shockwaves through the air that made the wolves in the far valleys lift their heads and howl as one. They didn't know why, they only knew something ancient and sacred had returned. He rose slowly, taller than before, the air bending around him. The old Alpha King was gone. What stood in his place was something new, neither god nor beast nor man. The first Alpha of the Silver Night. The howl that shook heaven. Kale threw back his head and let out a single howl. It was not rage, it was not grief, it was truth. The sound tore through the clouds, shattering what remained of the divine gates above. Every celestial beast fled, every false god cowered, the heavens themselves quaked at the echo of that sound. Love's defiance turned into power. And from that howl, the impossible happened. The broken moon returned. The resurrected moon. The sky pulsed once, twice, then burst open in blinding light. Fragments of the shattered moon began to drift together, drawn by something deeper than gravity, memory. Kale's howl called them home, piece by piece, until the silver orb hung whole once more, glowing brighter than it ever had in the Age of Gods. But it wasn't the same. The new moon was alive. It pulsed faintly, as if it had a heartbeat. His heartbeat. Kale looked up, eyes wet. "Celine?" The moon shimmered, its surface rippling with faint light. For a moment, he thought he saw her face reflected there, smiling, peaceful. He reached toward it, whispering, "You kept your promise." The wolves awaken all across the world, wolves stirred. In the frozen north, a pack leader lifted his head and howled, finding his power restored. In the southern deserts, a lone she-wolf opened her eyes to find silver light coursing beneath her skin. In the forests of Viridon, cubs were born under the glow of a moon that no longer belonged to the gods but to something greater, to love itself. The wolves felt it before words could name it. Their alpha had become the sky. The fear of heaven in the hollow remnants of their golden halls, the surviving gods looked down upon the reborn world, and trembled. He lives, one whispered. The goddess power flows through him. He is the moon now. The eldest god slammed his fist upon the table of stars. Then we retreat, until the light fades again, until the heart forgets. And for the first time since creation, heaven fell silent, not out of peace, but out of fear. The kingdom of silver days turned into weeks. The fires dimmed. The snow began to fall again, soft and pure. Viridon rose from its ashes, rebuilt under the glow of the new moon. Kale wandered its streets, quieter than before, eyes distant, touched by eternity. His people called him, the Alpha Eternal, but he no longer wore crowns or armor. He no longer neighed them. When he passed, wolves bowed, not out of duty, but reverence. Children reached out to touch his cloak, whispering stories of how their king had made the moon rise again. But those closest to him knew, every night, when the city slept, he climbed the tower alone and spoke softly to the sky. You once said you'd become smaller to stay beside me. So tell me, Selene, are you the moon, or the light that keeps me alive beneath it? The sky never answered, but the stars always seemed to burn brighter when he asked. The echo of her light one night, as the wolves slept and Viridon dreamed, a soft wind blew through the fortress halls. It carried a whisper, not words, but warmth. Kale stirred from his seat beside the fire. The silver feather he'd kept, the last remnant of her light, glowed faintly in his hand. He looked up. For a heartbeat, she was there. Not as a vision or ghost, but as presence, light curling into shape, soft eyes, a faint smile. Selene, you kept your promise, he whispered. Her voice was quiet as the tide. And you kept the world alive. He reached for her, but she only shook her head. Not yet. You still have to live the rest of it. I don't know how, he said. Yes, you do, she smiled. You taught me once. Now it's your turn. Her form dissolved into silver dust, swirling into the moonlight spilling through the window. Kale stood there, hand raised to the air that still shimmered where she'd been. He smiled through his tears. Then I'll see you in every night. The legend of the Silver Knight generations later, the story would be told as legend. How a goddess fell for a mortal alpha. How their love defied heaven and burned brighter than the sun. How the moon itself was reborn from their bond. But the oldest wolves still whispered the truth around fires, that when the night is quiet, when the moon glows silver instead of gold, if you listen close, you can still hear it, the alpha's howl, and the goddess's voice, woven together in the song that gave the world back its light. Chapter 10, The Alpha and the Eternal One. The long silence centuries passed. The world changed, rebuilt itself beneath the calm, steady light of the silver moon. Empires rose, kings forgot, gods hid. But the wolves remembered, and somewhere beyond time and rumor, within the marble ruins of the old citadel, Kale Riven remained. The Alpha of the Silver Knight. The last link between man and divine. He did not age as mortals did. His hair turned white, not from years but from light. His eyes still burned silver, reflecting a glow the world could not dim. He ruled no throne, gave no orders. He simply was, a quiet guardian wandering a land too peaceful to need him anymore. But every night, when the wind turned cold and the moon rose high, he climbed He tower that faced the heavens and whispered into the silence, you said you'd become smaller to stay beside me. I still can't find you. And though the moon shone brighter each time he spoke, it never answered. Until the night the mist came. The return of the silver mist. It began with a tremor, not of earth, but of air. The wind stopped, the stars dimmed, the world held its breath. Then, from the light of the moon, a silvery mist began to descend, coiling through the tower's window like smoke that had learned to dream. Kale turned. His sword, long since sheathed and cold, glowed faintly on instinct. The mist touched the ground, shimmered once, and began to take form. First came a shape, a woman's outline. Then light curved into skin, color, memory. And finally, a face he had memorized across lifetimes. Celine, he breathed, but the name sounded too small for what stood before him. Her presence filled the room without a single word. Her eyes gleamed with both tenderness and eternity. "I was never gone," she said softly. "You just couldn't see me while you still mourned." The reunion. Cale stepped closer, his voice shaking. "You gave everything. The moon, the light, yourself. Why come back now?" Celine smiled faintly. "Because you kept your promise." He stared, speechless. "You lived," she said, brushing her hand along his cheek. "You carried love instead of vengeance. You taught the world to remember us not as tragedy, but as rebirth." Her fingers rested on his chest, over the faint scar left by the divine flame. It pulsed once under her touch, glowing silver through the fabric. "I was never meant to kill you, Cale," she whispered. "I was meant to find you." He closed his eyes, tears slipping free. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Her smile deepened, sad, beautiful, eternal. "You can't lose what was written into your soul. The truth beyond heaven." The air shimmered with light that wasn't quite real, wasn't quite dream. "Tell me," Cale said, his voice quiet, reverent. "What are you now? Goddess? Spirit? Memory?" Celine tilted her head, the moonlight curling around her hair like a halo. "None of those." She stepped closer until her breath mingled with his. "I was never mortal," she said, her voice low, echoing through the space between stars. "I was only waiting for you to remember me." Cale's heart stilled, then beat once, stronger than it ever had. The light that had once lived in her eyes now burned in his too. Two souls, once torn apart by gods and fate, finally stood whole again. He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "Then don't let me forget again." "You won't," she said, smiling through tears of light. "We are not bound by heaven anymore. We are what comes after." The crowning the moon outside flared, silver fire spilling over the land. Every creature in Viridon, every wolf, every mortal, felt it. The wind carried the pulse of something vast and kind. From the heavens, the light descended, not as wrath this time, but as blessing. It wrapped around them both, forming two halos, one shaped like a crown of light, the other like a crescent moon. Cale bowed his head instinctively, but Celine caught his chin and lifted it. "Together," she said. The light crowned them both. The Alpha King and the Goddess of Silence. Two halves of one eternal vow. The eternal guardians outside, the wolves howled, not in mourning, but in joy. The silver moon glowed brighter than it ever had, reborn through love instead of sacrifice. From that night onward, the world called it the Silver Night Eternal, a sky that would never darken again. Cale and Celine stood hand in hand atop the tower, gazing at the world they had healed. "The gods will return someday," Cale said softly. "Then we'll remind them," Celine whispered. "That love is older than they are." He smiled. "And stronger." They looked up as the light grew, wrapping them in peace. Their forms blurred, two outlines merging, rising slowly toward the moon until they vanished into its glow. The legend's end, and so, the story ended where it began, with a goddess and a king, a promise and a name, a silence that became a song. From that day forward, every wolf born under the silver night carried a glimmer of their light in its eyes. And when lovers looked up at the moon and whispered each other's names, the stars seemed to shimmer in reply, as if somewhere beyond the sky, two eternal hearts were still listening. "I was never meant to kill you, Cale. I was meant to find you. And I was meant to remember." The moon crowned them both, Alpha King and Goddess of Silence, eternal guardians of love reborn.